Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswata Deve Gauravani Prachadane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastatadesha Tadane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 18, verse 47. Apapeshu svabhrityeshu balena pakva buddhina papam kritam tad bhagavan sarvatmakshantam arhati. Apapeshu, unto one who is completely free from all sins. Svabhrityeshu, unto one who is subordinate and deserves to be protected. Balena, by a child. Pakva, who is immature. Buddhina, by intelligence. Papam, sinful act, Kritam, has been done. Tat, Bhagavan, therefore the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Sarva Atma, one who is all-pervading, Kshantam, just to pardon, Arhati, deserve. Translation, then the Rishi prayed to the all-pervading personality of Godhead to pardon his immature boy who had no intelligence, who had committed the great sin of cursing a person who was completely free from all sins, who was subordinate, and who deserved to be protected. Purport, everyone is responsible for his own action, either pious or sinful. Rishi Samika could foresee that his son had committed a great sin by cursing Maharaj Parikshit, who deserved to be protected by the Brahmanas, for he was a pious ruler and completely free from all sins because of his being first-class devotee of the Lord. When an offense is done unto the devotee of the Lord, it is very difficult to overcome the reaction. The Brahmanas, being at the head of the social orders, are meant to give protection to their subordinates and not to curse them. There are occasions when a Brahmana may furiously curse a subordinate Kshatriya or Vaishya, etc., but in the case of Maharaj Parikshit, there were no grounds, as already explained. The foolish boy had done it out of sheer vanity in being a Brahmana's son, and thus he became liable to be punished by the law of God. The Lord never forgives a person who condemns his pure devotee. Therefore, by cursing the king, the foolish Shringi had committed not only a sin, but also the greatest offense. Therefore, the Rishi could foresee that only the Supreme Personality of Godhead could save his boy from his sinful act. He therefore directly prayed for pardon from the Supreme Lord, who alone can undo a thing which is impossible to change. The appeal was made in the name of a foolish boy who had developed no intelligence at all. A question may be raised herein that since it was the desire of the Lord that Parikshit Maharaj be put into that awkward position so that he might be delivered from material existence, then why was the Brahmana's son made responsible for this offensive act? The answer is that the offensive act was performed by a child only so that he could be excused very easily, and thus the prayer of the father was accepted. But if the question is raised why the Brahmana community as a whole was made responsible for allowing Kali into the world affairs, the answer is given in the Varaha Purana. That the demons who acted inimically towards the personality of Godhead but were not killed by the Lord were allowed to take birth in the families of Brahmanas to take advantage of the age of Kali. The all-merciful Lord gave them a chance to have their births in the families of pious Brahmanas so that they could progress towards salvation. But the demons, instead of utilizing a good opportunity, misuse the Brahminical culture due to being puffed up by vanity and becoming Brahmanas. The typical example is the son of Samika Rishi, and all the foolish sons of Brahmanas are warned hereby not to become as foolish as Shringi and be always on guard against the demoniac qualities which they had in their previous births. The foolish boy was, of course, excused by the Lord, but others who may not have a father like Samika Rishi will be put into great difficulty if they misuse the advantages obtained by birth in a Brahmana family. Translation, then the Rishi prayed to the all-pervading personality of God to pardon his immature boy who had no intelligence and who had committed the great sin of cursing a person who was completely free from all sins, who was subordinate, and who deserved to be protected. So, Prabhupada explains here in the purport that that boy had committed not just a sin, but an aparad. So what is the difference? So a sin is a general concept, or a concept that applies to everyone, all human beings. An animal cannot commit a sin, but a human being can commit a sin. And technically, the sin is defined by scriptures. The Dharma Shastras will define what is a sin. So these are certain acts which you should not do. So all sins are forbidden. The opposite is the punya. We have the papa, which is the sin, and you shouldn't do that. And the pious act, or the punya, is the act which you should do. So this is the opposite. So we have a whole list of acts which you should not do, mentioned in the scriptures. Of course, the Vedic scriptures may sometimes differ in what the sin is. Some sins are not considered so bad, others are worse, etc. So the scriptures may emphasize one sin more than the other. And of course, other scriptures of the world might have different lists of sins, what is sin and what is not sinful. So what is sinful in the Vedic literature may not be sinful in, let's say, Islam or Christianity or something, or sometimes they may be sinful equally. So there's agreement and disagreement on some points. It depends on which scripture you want to follow. So if you follow the Vedic scripture, then you have to look at that list and follow that list and avoid certain activities. So the sinful acts are the ones you avoid. So a major part of that, those actions, those sinful actions, are actions which are unnecessary and violent, and they disturb other living entities. So that's probably, we can say, that's generalist conception of sin, to disturb other living entities, including human beings, unnecessarily. If it is necessary, fine. So we can kill a plant if we have to eat, or you can even kill an animal if you're starving, and it's not a sin. But if you can survive without killing the plant or the animal, then it is a sin if you kill it. So if you excessive, in other words, if you're not hungry and still you kill the plant or the animal, then it's sinful. So in other words, we have to be a little bit in control of our senses and not waste things, unnecessarily commit violence in this world. So basically, any sin is a violence against other living entities. And the reaction is different according to the level of advancement of that particular living entity and according to your intention behind it. So therefore, the worst thing is to kill human beings. But then we do find cases where you can kill a human being in war. If somebody attacks you, if they light fire to your house, etc. There are 7 conditions under which you can commit violence against another person. So general ones. So there are rules, and then there's exception to the rules also, according to the circumstance. So no sin is absolute. There's always exceptional cases where things are allowed, we can say. Or maybe there are some absolute ones also. But anyway, the idea is it's concerning the living entities and the violence to living entities. So those are the major type of sins. But the other type of sins is not doing the pious activity, then it's considered a sin. So if you don't do your Sandhyavandana as a Brahmana, do 3 times a day, chant your Gayatri with this particular ceremony called Sandhyavandana, it's considered to be sinful. Because you're omitting to do that act, which is pious act. So if you omit certain pious acts, so what you call nitya karmas, activities you have to do every day, is considered to be sinful. But the major ones are these ones where there is some violence, and therefore it is forbidden to do that violence. And then we have the opposite. The opposite activity is to do activities which give benefit to other living entities. So that's called the punya. And they give opposite results. The sin or the impious act, the papa, gives a bad reaction. You will get equal suffering according to the suffering you cause to other living entities. That's the reaction. It may not happen in this lifetime. So usually we say karma is not about this lifetime, but next lifetime. So if you kill a cow in this lifetime, you may not get the reaction now. Some future lifetime, maybe next lifetime or 5 lifetimes later, you get the reaction. So that's the bad karma we get from the violent act. So every action gives a result, a karma. Every act you do all day gives some sort of karma in a future lifetime. So you're doing activities all day long, it all gives reaction in a future lifetime. So you get every day of your life, you're accruing more and more karmas for previous, future lifetimes by that. So you're completely bound up by this, and the only way you get rid of them is by experiencing them. So that means we have to keep taking body after body after body to get rid of our karmas. And we'll never end it, because every lifetime we're doing more activities and we're creating new karmas. So it's an endless cycle. So this is why it's like a wheel, the wheel of karma. It just goes on forever like this. You do activities and you're getting results, and doing more activities and getting results. Very difficult to get out of that. And these give suffering. All these little acts. It may be intentional, in which case you get bad results, very bad results. Or it may be unintentional, in which you get light results, like stepping on a bug, or lighting a fire and a bug flies into the fire and dies. So that's an accidental one. So you get less result for that. But you get some little problem. Maybe you get scratched on your finger in one lifetime because whatever, sweep the floor and some bug gets killed or whatever, and then you get some result for that. So we're getting constant reactions for our sins. Some are light, some are heavy. And then we have the punyas, the pious acts. This may also be accidental. Accidentally you do some act or whatever, you don't even know if you've done it, and it's considered a punya. Or intentional punya. So that gives good result. You get good health, you get long life, you get money, whatever like this. You get good family, whatever. These are called punyas. So you get the result of your punya in a future life also. So the two balance out. So normally a person doesn't do all sinful activities. There's a mixture. And therefore they end up with a mixture of happiness and distress in every lifetime. But some people get more suffering in their lifetime and less enjoyment. That means previous lifetime they've done more sinful activities, serious sinful activities, and less punyas. And therefore they have to suffer more in the next lifetime. So that's the general concept of sin. But it all has to do with the material body. Your material body is suffering or enjoying as a result of these activities involving the body, but ultimately by the decision of the jiva. So as a human being, we are responsible for deciding this is a sin or this is not a sin. I should do this act or I should not do this act. Because we can decide that using the scriptural laws, then we are responsible and we get the karma. Animals walking around and accidentally or intentionally also eating and doing whatever, killing, but they don't get any result for that because they're not aware of the laws, and they don't have any discrimination on what is right and what is wrong, what is sinful and not sinful. So it applies to the human being, the adult human being. If there's children, then of course it's like animal, they don't get any result. So as an adult human being, then we're all subject to that law of karma. And therefore, it is wise if we know the rules of dharma. We know what is sin and what is not, so we can avoid it, and then we live more comfortably. So that is why everybody in society has to be educated properly. And therefore, they would send the children to the Gurukul, and they would learn dharma and how to act, how to conduct themselves properly, so that they avoid the sin and do the punya, and therefore they can live comfortably life after life after life. But anyway, it has to do with the body, getting a better body or getting a worse body, a body of suffering or a body of enjoyment in the material world, due to papa and punya. For normal people, normal humans in this world, it's good. Their concept is, let me live comfortably. let me have less suffering. So therefore, this is good. They avoid the sinful acts, and they end up life after life with peaceful life. Good for them. They accept that. It's nice. But of course, from the higher point of view, we know that this is, material. It's life after life. You're taking birth, and it's a mixture of papa and punya, and you can never get out of this cycle. So what's the use of it all? And at the same time, we're not the body. We're the soul. So it's only got to do with the adjustment of the material body that we do the pious act and avoid the sin, and we get a little more comfort in our life with our material body. But if we're more intelligent, then we understand that actually we're not the body, we're the soul. In which case, this doesn't have too much meaning anymore, the papa and punya. But of course, even if we are the soul, still we don't like the suffering. But nevertheless, we have an idea that the soul is there, so the soul is different from the body, so why worry too much about papa and punya, etc. So this is from the spiritual point of view. So that's a higher concept. Nevertheless, even if we are spiritually advanced or we have some spiritual insight, we're living in this material world and we do have a body. So we're still acting, we're still living, we still have to maintain the body. Consequently, we still have to survive and kill animal or kill plant or whatever. You still have to survive as long as you're living. So though we're supposed to be spiritual, still there's some dependence of our body upon the material world. So as long as we're dependent on the body, we have to still get affected by this law of karma in the material world, even as devotees. So therefore the devotee also, if he doesn't want to suffer too much, then he has to also understand these laws and avoid the sins, etc. There are many rules, many things which are sinful, but they're nicely summarized here in the Bhagavatam, where we have these 4 principles. The legs of the bull, with truth and mercy, etc., and sense control, tapa, and cleanliness. So what destroys those are the sins, and the sins were summarized as intoxication, gambling, violence, and meat eating, like this. Illicit sex. These were considered to be the main sinful activities which destroy the pillars of Dharma. So that's a summary of the sins. Just think of 4 things, and then we can expand on that, get so many lists like that. But that's a summary. So they all involve some sort of violence. So therefore, even as devotees, we have to be aware of these principles and avoid them. But for the devotee, it's not just, we want to live comfortably in our next lifetime, therefore we have to avoid the 4 sinful activities. There's other problem, and that is that the sinful acts themselves are unfavorable for bhakti. Because they increase our attachment to the material world. So we can't intentionally increase our attachment and progress in bhakti at the same time. So we do have to have some standard of sense control. Okay. So anyway, this is the sin. So it's applicable even for devotees. That we have to observe avoiding sins, etc. However, if we look in devotional literature like Nectar of Devotion, Rupa Goswami's work, we look there at the 64 Angas of Bhakti. We look very carefully there. He doesn't mention avoid sinful activity at all, really. It's not very obvious there. But we do find in the 20th and 19th Anga of Bhakti, the do nots, he says, don't disturb any living entity. That's one of his principles. Don't disturb any living entity. And of course the opposite of that, we respect all living entities. So therefore, devotionally speaking, in Lord Chaitanya's prayer, in the Shastastika there we have, we give respect to all others and we don't expect respect for ourselves. We're humbler than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree. So that's a very basic principle even for bhakti. So there is a little bit of reference there, but other than that, we don't see the rules, no intoxication, etc. We don't find those explicitly written there in the Nectar of Devotion. So they're more concentrating on the positive things to do in bhakti, like hearing and chanting and remembering, which produce bhakti, rather than emphasize doing punyas and avoiding sin. However, we do have among those lists of angas, then we do have avoidance of aparad. Avoid the aparads. So there's different types of aparads. There's seva aparads, which are offenses to the deity, deity room, etc. And coming into the deity room with your shoes on or whatever like this, and talking loudly and disrespectfully before the deity, etc. These are considered seva aparads. So they're aparads. So we avoid those because it's offending the Lord. But then we have the nam-aparads. These are considered to be more serious. And then among the nam-aparads, the very first one, sadhu ninda, criticizing the Vaishnava, or not just criticizing, violence against the Vaishnava, that's considered to be one of the most serious ones of all. So that's where the violence and what we call the sin is transferred into devotional sin. That's the aparads, and particularly the Vaishnava aparad. So we have regular sin, and then we have devotional sin. And for the devotees, the sin itself is not so important. It is the devotional sin which is worse. So why is that? It's because the normal sin will give you a problem with your body. Okay, you have to suffer your next lifetime. You have to get some sickness, have to get an accident, whatever. Okay. But the devotee's not so concerned. Okay, if I get an accident, I get sick, so what? I can still chant Hare Krishna, I can still do my devotional service. That's what I want to do. So no, whether I'm in heaven or hell, I'll continue my bhakti. So therefore the result of a sinful activity is not so important for the devotee. But what is the aparad? What is the problem with the aparad? That just doesn't affect your body. That affects the jiva. The jiva loses his bhakti. That's what's so problematic there. That is what the devotee doesn't want. So that's why he has to avoid the aparads more than the sins, because it creates such a problem for advancement in devotional service. So there are many aparads. We recite the 10 aparads every day, the 10 offenses. And as I said, among those, that first one, the sadhu ninda, or blaspheming or criticizing the Vaishnava, is considered to be the most serious one. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has kind of emphasized that one in the Chaitanya Charitamrita by calling it the mad elephant offense. You don't have elephants here, but it's common in South India and Bengal and Assam. They do have wild elephants still. They just live out in the wild, and they run around in the forest and eat their food, whatever, leaves or whatever. Sometimes they get a little wild, and especially the males, they get more wild, and they'll run into the village and destroy everything, and they'll tear up the crops. They don't even want to eat them, just run around destroying everything. That's a mad elephant. So the Vaishnava aparad, the sadhu ninda, is like that. It just like irrationally just starts destroying. But what does it destroy? It's not destroying your body. It's destroying the bhakti that you cultivated as a jiva. So when we begin bhakti, the bhakti is considered to be like a little seed, and then you plant it in the heart or in the atma, and then you hear and chant and associate with devotees, and that seed sprouts. The bhakti begins to grow. And it grows and grows and grows, and it's described, it grows, it goes up, pierces the coverings of the universe and goes to Goloka, and there it gets to the lotus feet of Krishna, and then it produces fruit. And then you can eat the fruit. That's prema. Enjoy. You get bliss. But when it's growing, obviously, a little plant, it is very delicate, and it has to be taken care of. It has to be protected very nicely. And there's problems because the weeds come up and so on. So when you're planting your garden, you have to be very careful as a gardener that you pull up the weeds and water it and make sure that it doesn't get too much sun, but gets enough sun and doesn't get too much water because it will rot the seed, etc. I have to protect it from the wild animals and the kangaroos and whatever, and the mad elephants. So the mad elephant's the worst. Here you have kangaroos, but the mad elephant's worse. He gets bigger, and he gives a step on it, and it's finished. So that's the mad elephant offense. That is the Vaishnava aparad. With that one, you can destroy your bhakti completely, or it becomes in such a state that it's very difficult to do the bhakti at all. It becomes like a very secondary interest, and we lose interest in it, or we're not serious about it anymore. So when a bhakti reaches that state, that means it's been severely injured, and it may not recover, or it may get completely wiped out. As the elephant will stamp on the plant, and it's dead. So that Vaishnava aparad can completely eradicate the bhakti. So that's what the Vaishnava fears the most, that he doesn't have any more bhakti. The bhakti isn't progressing, it's not even, it's decreasing or it disappears. So that's a great misfortune for the devotee. So that is what the devotee is serious about. So therefore that gets more emphasis than the sinful activity. But we can see that it's also a sin. So if we criticize people in general, that's also a sin. Why we have to criticize others and just harass people by words, or why do we attack people or fight with people? Again, it's all considered like sin, violence, unnecessary violence. But if it's with a devotee, then it's even worse, because you get this effect of that bhakti gets destroyed. That's what makes it worse. So it's like a sin, but it's a sin against a devotee, or things related to devotional service. So the effect is devotionally disastrous. And therefore, particularly the Vaishnava aparad is called the mad elephant offense. So, not only that offense, the other offenses also, they will also damage the bhakti, the nam-aparads. They're considered to be more serious than the seva aparads, the Vaishnava aparad, the nam-aparads, the 10 aparads there. So, but of those, then the Vaishnava aparads, sadhu ninda is considered to be the most serious of all. In any case, they will all damage the bhakti, so therefore we have to be very careful about them. So there is a violence against the devotees, that is the sadhu ninda one. And of course we have guru or avagya, that's violence against the guru, disrespect for the guru of some sort, either by words or actions or whatever. So that's also bad. And then we have the other ones against the process of bhakti itself, thinking that the name is not powerful, thinking that the results are material, etc. So these are all, the attitudes in them decrease the bhakti. So these are considered worse than sinful activities. That doesn't mean they don't also give sinful results. Definitely. Just like, just because we get the bad effect of no bhakti, it doesn't mean we're not free from the karma as well. So we can also get the bad karma as well. So in the future lifetime we have to suffer physically as well. Plus we have to we also destroy our bhakti as a result of the Vaishnava aparad. So we get both effects. But the serious one is the effect on devotional service. So that's why there's more emphasis upon the aparad, especially the Vaishnava aparad, than upon the sinful activities in bhakti. The other point, of course, is that the sins themselves, whatever sins we commit, are destroyed by the process of bhakti itself, so we don't get any karma. So that's the first result of bhakti, in one sense, mentioned in the Nectar of Devotion, kleshagni, destruction of klesha, destruction of suffering. That bhakti destroys suffering. Your karmas, which are difficult, your future karmas, and the karmas of this lifetime gets destroyed by the process of bhakti. And if you commit a karma, a bad sin, then you don't have to do atonements as normal prayashittas, the normal procedure. If you do a sinful activity according to Dharma, then you have to do another act, a pious act, to counteract that. So it says, no, you just do bhakti. So bhakti destroys the result of that sinful act that you've committed. That's the prayaschitta, that's the atonement. Just do continue the bhakti. So you don't have to do the prayaschitta. Bhakti destroys all the results. However, the exception is if you intentionally commit the sin so that you can get rid of the effect by doing bhakti or chanting the holy name. That's considered the seventh aparad. To, on the strength of the holy name, commit more sin. So if you use bhakti and the holy name as an excuse to do more sin, that's even worse. So you don't escape. You can't even do prayaschitta for that. You cannot escape the result of that. You will get worse effects because of that. So we can't take advantage of the name to commit more sin. But if it's we call accidental sin we couldn't help or whatever, we're not repeatedly doing it, then it's covered up by process of bhakti itself. So therefore there's less, for that reason, there's less emphasis upon the sin and more emphasis upon the aparad aspect. Okay, so therefore in this case we find that the boy had committed a sinful act because without intelligence he had cursed the king, who was said here in this to be innocent. He was free from sin. Apapa, without sin. And he's britya, svabritya. Britya means servant, subservient. And sva means to oneself. So the kshatriya is subservient to the brahmana. So that means we have to protect them, not curse them. So we have to give them good advice and whatever instead of cursing them and whatever. So he was sinless and he was lower. He was a kshatriya, and therefore he shouldn't have been cursed in this way. So that's the violence there is on the level of, let's say, normal dharma. The boy transgressed the regular rules of a brahmana. He was not sinful, and he was also dependent on the brahmana, so therefore you should not curse him. But then the other one is, as Prabhupada mentions in the purport, is he was a great devotee. So not only he cursed because of he was an innocent person, whatever, but he was also a great devotee of the Lord, so that curse became a aparad as well. So therefore that rash act of the Brahmana boy was not only sinful, it was also Vaishnava aparad. So very, very bad. So the father was very aware of this because he was very respectful towards Parikshit Maharaj. In the previous verse, he says his Mahabhagavata. He's a very great devotee. So he was aware of the importance of devotees. So if the boy cursed him, it was not just doing a sinful activity, but he was committing a great Vaishnava aparad, which is even worse. So therefore because it would destroy bhakti completely, and the father he was a devotee, so he was worried about that more than anything else. So therefore what's to be done in this case? So normal atonements or prayaschitas don't work with serious cases. So for Vaishnava aparad, we cannot just go back to Dharma Shastra and do some prayaschitas to get rid of the effect of our aparad. For sinful activities, you can do that, but not for the aparad. So for the aparad, then we have several procedures. So one is you go back to the person who you offended and you apologize to the person and hope he accepts the apology. And then you continue your devotional service with a regretful heart. And then gradually you can recover from your bhakti can recover. So that's the general procedure. But in some cases the person may not even forgive you. So what are you supposed to do? In that case, it says, take shelter of the holy name. You simply call out to Krishna. You pray to Krishna. So this is what the Rishi is doing here, praying to Krishna. Please forgive my son, forgive my son. So, therefore, Rishi, the sage, did the proper thing here by understanding that the only one who could give the boy relief was Supreme Lord himself in this case. Of course, he could have gone to the king also, but he applied directly to the Supreme Lord here. Okay, any question?
Just a few points. We see in this case how Samika Rishi, rather than approaching Parikshit, which would seem the logical thing to do, he prayed directly to Krishna. Why approach the Lord directly, not the devotee, which seems to be more effective way of getting a response. And also, we can see that Parikshit didn't see this offense anyhow.
Yeah. Well, we could logically think in this way as well, but we see also the Parikshit Maharaj accepted the curse. So we can say yes, the Lord didn't take it as an offense because we see it's also an arrangement of the Lord, the whole thing. So ultimately, we can say it's not an offense, but say superficially from the external, we can say, then there was the offense. And why the Rishi didn't go directly, I suppose because actually he didn't commit the offense, it was his boy that did it, but the boy was so unintelligent that probably he wouldn't go himself. He didn't seem to be very intelligent boy, so at that point the father just took responsibility and began praying to the Lord to forgive him.
And then you mentioned just at the end there about Vaishnava Aparad, and like if one approaches the Vaishnava doesn't accept the apology, then it makes sure the whole name.
Yeah.
It seems to be that would have to be pretty serious shelter. You wouldn't just like, chant Hare Krishna or okay kind of thing.
Yeah, obviously. We have to be seriously chant all the time, constantly chant the holy name with, very intensity.
So Samika Rishi, he sort of accepted responsibility of his son's action, and it almost seems that he was taking responsibility on the whole Brahmin community because of the act of his one child. I'm just thinking, in Vedic culture, is there any particular age where it's said that the children accept the karma for themselves? Like at what age do they become?
There probably is in Manu Samhita somewhere like that, but as far as Bhaktivinoda Thakur kind of indirectly says that when the person is mature, which means like 17 years old, then we can decide his varna and his tendencies become clear. So it looks at that point he's a responsible person. So, when he's grown up, in other words, sufficiently and has enough intelligence, which means, all getting towards his 20s or something like that.
So up to that age, more or less, the parents are sharing the karma of the children.
Yeah, it looks like it. Yeah. They're responsible. They're the responsible person, so they get the karma. Just like it says that the husband takes responsibility for the wife, so she does a sinful activity, the husband's responsible. As with the guru, for the disciple. So the disciple commits the sin, the guru gets the result. So the responsible person ends up with the result.
So in the purport it mentions that the demons took birth by Krishna's arrangement as brahmanas, sort of to give them some benefit, from to overcome the demoniac propensity, but it was seen that
they didn't do that.
Misused that, but obviously Krishna's Trikalayan, he would have known that was going to be the end result, right? So, as a result, we have the demons taking birth as brahmanas and
well, it's not that only in Brahmin families demons take birth; they're taking birth everywhere. But this is one thing that some of the demons they took birth like that. So this is only to explain how Shringi happened to end up in this position of offending Parikshit.
Just on that point, in response to my uncle's question about the age,
Yeah.
In that story where Mandavya Rishi curses Yudhisthira Maharaj, he makes the point that
Vidura. Or no, Mandavya Muni with Yamaraj.
Yamaraj.
Yeah.
He makes the point to Yamaraj.
Oh, he was a child.
I was a child. How do they not be responsible? Children aren't responsible for their acts.
Yeah. And then he got punished, and then the Muni cursed him because he did the wrong thing. So it looks like Yamaraj made a mistake. He shouldn't have punished the child to that extent, you know.
I was wondering if every activity, because sometimes there are activities that we know are bad, but I'm wondering if they're always sinful or not. Like, for example, we know throwing away prasadam is bad, but would that be sinful as well, or aparad?
Well, it's like, what is it? We have to take what we need, but not too much. There's a balance on this earth, so we take what is necessary, but we don't be extravagant and waste. So we can say if we're throwing things up, maybe that's all wasted. So in one sense, it becomes a sinful activity or whatever like that. So we have to be very careful that we don't waste things as much as possible.
Another question. When you get a reaction for a sinful activity committed previously, is the reaction always going to be exactly what you did before? Or can you get a different sinful reaction? Like, let's say you kidnapped a child in a previous life.
So you get kidnapped?
Yeah.
No, not exactly. No, it could be quite different. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think in the Garuda Purana it gives some of the results of your karmas. They're quite different from the original thing, you know, that you did.
In the beginning, we were talking about the different scriptures and the different traditions, right? Oh, sorry. In the beginning, you were talking about the different traditions and the different scriptures and the different explanation that they give.
Yeah.
So, people like from different traditions, when someone moves from their tradition and goes, say, becomes a devotee, because they didn't have enough information.
Yeah.
See, like with the Christians, even Jesus said, I cannot tell you everything, because you cannot bear it.
Yeah.
So that then the Christians will say, there's no other way but to Jesus. Or even the born agains telling you you're going to hell if you don't surrender to Jesus.
Yeah.
And so for someone to actually take up Christian consciousness, which happens, we have Jews coming to us, we have Buddhists coming to us, we have Muslims coming to us, you know, because they are not getting enough knowledge from their own tradition. Correct.
Yeah. So there's different levels, or even in the Varnashram system, there's different levels of sin. So the level of sin for the Brahmana, there's more sins he can commit than for the Kshatriya or for the Vaishya or for the Sudra. So the Kshatriya can drink liquor. The Brahmin cannot. He can't even touch it. If he touches it, he has to go through a whole purificatory ceremony. Or if he touches blood or something of an animal, it's like condemned, and he has to really do a lot of things to get rid of that blood from his body, and just touching it like that. So, whereas the Kshatriyas, they're killing the animal or killing people also. So the rules are different even in the Varnashram system. The sin is different for different levels. And Sudra is more relaxed, a little more for the Vaishya, a little more for the Kshatriya, and most for the Brahmana. So we have levels there, even what to speak of outside in the normal society, which is not even Varnashramic. So they have one level. But they have some level, at least every religion has some level of things. So therefore we have the 10 Commandments of Christ, Moses. Moses has 10 Commandments. So there's also practical, on one level. But they're not as inclusive, let's say, as the Vedic system for the Brahmana, let's say. Maybe down the Sudra level, fine, but when we get to the Brahmana level, then we see there's much more refinement there in terms of what is sin.
Another question about the Scientology, that you don't always get the same reaction to the thing that we did.
Yeah.
But it says, Prabhupada told us that capital punishment is good, Because the person...
He gets the right eye for eye, tooth for a tooth, basically. You kill, you get killed, or whatever like that,
The next time his plane is free, and he can take a much out of it. But as far as I've known, I've been into quite some years. For me, my understanding was if you kill in this life, and by somehow or other you get away with it and you don't get the capital punishment, then in the next life you have to come back and you have to be killed. I always think of this about the Australian Aboriginals, because the ones that are here now, they're not Aboriginals in their last life. Many lives back, they were one of those people that were killing the Aboriginals.
So they suffer their result in this
And then
lifetime.
they come back and now as well as me, everyone should respect and honour us. But they were the same people that weren't respecting and honouring in their last life.
So according to the pain you cause the living entities, that amount of pain you're going to get in some form or other. It may not be exactly the same way, but somehow you're going to have to suffer equally as to the suffering you cause, basically.
Another question. I don't say that I do this, but you might know of some devotees that fell into Maya and they aborted the baby. And then they get back on track later on. So because they aborted their baby, in the next life, will they have to come back and have that
Possibly, but if they're devotees, they may get exempted. It depends on the case, you know.
Okay, thank you.
Maharaj, you were talking about the difference between simple activities and aparad. So, some devotees may sometimes unintentionally commit simple activities, or maybe sometimes intentionally. So if it's unintentional, would that not be aparad? But if it's an intentional sin, could that be seen as aparad because it's an offense to the spiritual master, because you're disobeying the orders that you took when you took initiation?
Well, we have anartas, and due to the anartas, in spite of the fact that we have knowledge, then we may commit some sin. So in one sense, we have knowledge and we're doing it. But the aparad part of it is if we're thinking, well, I'll commit the sin, it doesn't matter because I can chant Hare Krishna, I won't get any reaction from anybody. That becomes the seventh aparad. So the other one is generally overcome by the bhakti itself. But if you continue to do that, just continue to do that sinful activity, and you have no intention of giving it up, at that point then Krishna is not that you're still my devotee and you continue your devotional service. At that point then the Lord also may not recognize you anymore as a devotee. So if it becomes continuous. If you rectify yourself, as said in Bhagavad Gita, he rights himself and he continues devotional service. Fine, Lord, okay, fine, I don't care about it. But if you continue to do the sinful activity on and on and on, then it's not the same case. The Lord's not going to accept you as a devotee anymore. So it would depend upon the individual and his intention behind it. Okay. Okay.
Wondering how do you know if you've committed Vaishnava aparad or Namaparad, and how do you get over that, and how do you rectify it?
Well, if we don't know, then it's more on us on the unintentional or accidental type of thing, in which case the effect will not be so much. And of course the effect of the aparad is you start losing your enthusiasm for bhakti. So if we can't find out the reason for the decrease in the bhakti and our inability to do it, then it could be because of some unintentional aparad. And well, what's the remedy for that? All we can do is take association of devotees and try to, do our devotional service properly. Okay? Hare Krishna.